It wasn't that long ago when Blizzard announced that they would be making some subtle but significant changes to Classic WoW with the arrival of Phase 6. While Hunter and Shaman changes were never expected, it did pave the way for future changes to be made in order to make Classic WoW an even more fluid experience. However, this did finally raise the questions. When are the next changes to come, and what will they be? The answer? Spell batching. And thank you God. Hello and welcome, I am Zabraxi. As you may have already heard, and if you haven't, here you go. But spell batching is going to be minimized to a point of near removal in an upcoming patch. And I don't want to go over too deeply the technical reasons why this may be good or not. Specifically, I will go over the basic fundamentals of it, but I specifically want to address what does this mean for the future of Classic? Is the fact that Blizzard just recently had the attack power change in Phase 6 and the Shaman Totem change in Phase 6, along now with the spell batching change, is Blizzard shifting their philosophy to how they approach Classic WoW? And if so, what does that mean for Classic TBC? Let's talk about it. So in order to really start off, we're going to need to do a quick overview of spell batching, what it does, why it exists, and why it's going to be removed in an upcoming patch. Spell batching is a method that queues together actions taken in-game and executes them all at the end of a given window. Think about it this way. In the background, while you're playing WoW, there is a timer that triggers once every 400 milliseconds. Many actions, such as many skills, attacks, spells, purchasing items, etc., they trigger at the end of each of these 400 ms windows. In Classic, this can create some pretty iconic moments, such as two mages sheeping each other, two warriors charging at each other's original positions only to swap and look stupid, or even a tank dying despite your heal landing 150 milliseconds before the final hit. It's incredibly important to note that spell batching, despite having gained a hated reputation recently, did exist for a good reason back in the mid to late 2000s. This methodology of processing actions allowed Blizzard to normalize the incredibly vast range of internet speeds amongst its players. Blizzard's servers would update the client less often and in small bursts, rather than a larger constant flow of data. I'm really only scratching the surface here, but batching served a very strong purpose and was overall a success for its time. This then leads us to why it's effectively being removed. During the mid to late 2000s, it was helpful, but now, it's just a bit awkward. Spell batching worked because it smoothed out the experience despite negatively impacting many players regularly. Though, as technology has improved, this batching window has become more and more frustrating to many as it makes the game genuinely feel a bit laggy is probably the best word. Blizzard has decided to remove a hard batch window and will instead process these actions as fast as possible, thus resulting in only about a 1 to 10 millisecond delay on average. Think about it this way, the original Metroid on the NES was designed to run at a max of 30 frames per second. This decision was intentional, despite the fact that the NES and the Japanese Famicom could actually run up to 60 FPS, a decision that most people didn't have the televisions capable of noticing anyway, in order to provide a better experience by normalizing performance. Cut to the modern era, and Metroid has been brought to the Nintendo Switch Online, and in true emulation, it still runs at a capped 30 FPS with considerable frame drops. Despite the fact that this is true to the original, there's no technical or design reason to keep this performance, and thus, this NSO Metroid port has been met with some substantial backlash. That would be because a game at 30 FPS today it's unacceptable. I bring up the Metroid port specifically because this is nothing new to the gaming industry. A lot of re-releases have technical changes. So for WoW Classic, this was kind of only a matter of time. I'm genuinely not that surprised by it. What I am now surprised by are some of the answers that might be there to the larger question, what else now is on this table of changes? So Blizzard has now made the batching and attack power changes. One of these is a technical issue, and the other, a design oversight. Is it safe to say that not implementing the mage AoE cap earlier was a design oversight? It's kind of hard to not immediately respond with yes, so you can imagine an age of Classic WoW with a more restrictive AoE presence. Despite playing a mage myself, I do tend to harp on the mage AoE issue a lot, but it's because the impact on the game is just that massive. The insane amount of gold that exists in the economy, the limited pool of players in open world leveling zones, restricted supply of players to do lower level dungeons because of boosting. There's such a wide reach to the impact for mages' ability to farm the current way they do. Would implementing such a nerf ruin the spirit of Classic WoW, or would it simply plug a massive design oversight? The line between quote-unquote fixing Classic and quote original spirit can be very fine depending on the topic. It's no surprise that Blizzard went for as much of a no changes approach as possible to start. However, the life of Classic has proven that no changes actually leads to a lot of changes, mostly because of player behavior. So what about Classic TBC then? Are there issues that should be addressed, such as Blizzard has now touched in Classic Vanilla? Well, the Mage AoE nerf is definitely one, right? This change, though, doesn't actually get implemented until patch 2.2, a full 9 months or so after the launch of TBC. This means that loads of players will still be able to do their mage thing, but now with level 70 gear, which may even open up some now insanely new possibilities that people hadn't discovered then. Consider that most private servers in the scene, by the way, run off a 2.4.3 client and have the AoE cap implemented at launch. So how many farming options haven't been discovered yet, and what would their effect on the market be? In my video on the AoE damage cap, which you can watch by clicking that card above, I did it, YouTube, you proud of me? I mentioned about how Seed of Corruption has not been touched by the damage cap, since particularly all of Mage AoE abilities were nerfed by the cap and Warlock's primary AoE ability wasn't. This ended up creating a weird design shift. Blizzard seemed just fine with Warlocks being the stronger single target class than Mages during the Burning Crusade, but Blizzard always countered with the fact that Mages were the kings of AoE. This comment would ring true again when at the launch of the Breath of the Lich King, Blizzard implemented the Living Bomb talent specifically to provide mages with the ability to conquer all AoE situations over their Warlock brethren. Despite their claims that mages were AoE kings, in TBC, they were not. So should Blizzard apply the damage cap to Seed of Corruption to help squish the variance between Warlock and Mage raid viability? Is the fact that Stoneform being on a 3-minute cooldown but Will of the Forsaken arguably being the best racial in the game only on a 2-minute cooldown, is that a design oversight? Would nerfing Will of the Forsaken betray the spirit of TBC, or is it a desperately needed adjustment to normalize PvP performance amongst each faction? What about Melee in the Burning Crusade? TBC is notoriously anti-melee just by boss encounter design alone. However, Melee are also hit against the haste changes across the expansion. At launch, Melee haste rating provided 1% haste every 15.8 points or so. This conversion would be the same for caster haste as well. Patch 2.1 changed these values in order to buff Melee a bit, but also to curb the power spike that casters were going to receive with increased haste values from gear in later tiers. In this Black Temple patch, Melee now received 1% haste every 10.5 rating, and casters were nerfed to 1% haste every 21 points. For some reason, probably for no other reason than uniformity, Blizzard reverted this change back to the original launch values in patch 2.2 and effectively nerfed all tier 4 to 5 melee players immensely. Everybody who has played TBC after this patch knows how bad melee can be in the first 2 tiers of the expansion, and these changes definitely seemed like a design oversight that should be addressed in classic TBC. Unless someone wants to genuinely argue to me that melee being effectively useless relative to ranged for like 2/3 of the expansion is part of that classic TBC spirit. However, if the purpose for normalizing haste values was for uniformity, as many suspect, as do I, then why did Blizzard not equalize hit ratings then? Casters in TBC gain hit at a faster rate than Melee, despite the fact that casters actually need less of it on average. This could very well easily be argued as another design oversight that aggressively punishes Melee and yet benefits casters immensely. Many people, myself included, would argue that the spirit of TBC meant that every class brought something valuable to the raid. This incentivized guilds to diversify their raid rosters pretty heavily. On the Burning Crusade launch, druids could purchase their slow flight form, but have no epic flight form quest until actually the Black Temple. Would it make sense to keep that held off until patch 2.1, or does it make sense to have that at launch? Should Blizzard interfere at all, or should they interfere only if player behavior is twisting the spirit of the original experience? Do you trust Blizzard, or anybody that's not yourself for that matter, to dictate what the spirit of the original is? I might not be ending the video with a hard solution or an answer that many of you may be hoping for. However, what I do feel is most important is that Blizzard treads incredibly carefully and that any changes be made limited in quantity. Classic WoW has opened up our minds to accept the fact that some changes just might be necessary. But perhaps the best approach Blizzard could make would be this: leave TBC the way it is, and then tweak after the problem exists in the live realms. By not taking any proactive approach, then the player base can experience that original expansion, flaws and all, but also receive an arguably better experience as slight modifications persist throughout the expansion. MMOs thrive on continued development. Classic WoW didn't have that, and it feels like it didn't have that. But at the same time, we all want the Burning Crusade. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more. There's plenty more coming. And if you disliked it and you think my voice is annoying, hit that dislike button and let me know how much I suck. I appreciate it. The reality to this discussion is that the whole concept and discussion and topic of changes in Classic is just massive spectrums of ranges of gray. It's very complicated into what people think is good, bad, what actually could arguably good or bad, and what's not a personal feeling. It's a very complicated topic, and I'm not going to pretend it's not. So please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, because what I may be for and what you may be for could be completely different, or even our whole fundamental idea of what is the spirit of the Burning Crusade, for example. What is that spirit? We may be on completely different ends of that. So I'd love to hear from you, because I want to be able to make as an unbiased, or at least as a full picture response as time goes on, because if Classic Vanilla has shown anything, Classic TBC is probably going to get some changes. So that's it for me, though. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye!